In this mod, I'm adding a USB-C to the Slim Vita stacked right under the micro USB. I'll demonstrate using Vita shell USB function. Here's a regular micro USB cable hooking up to a Windows 7. Can access and transfer files. Alright, this is an all-pin USB-C to USB-C. Using that new lower port, and that can transfer files. USB-C to USB 3 cord going into USB 3.1 port. These are USB 2 speeds, we're just jumping on that jack. And now for some charging. This is Qualcomm 3 charger. It doesn't matter which port I'm using. This is going into the new port though. It'll just support the 5 volts. Then the USB PD fast charging, otherwise known as power delivery. The USB-C Breakout board has two 5.1K resistors attached to CC1 and CC2, so this can make the hand shake and charge with USB PD. And then of course the original charger still works as well. For this we need the Slim Vita, of course. Need a Dremel for this, going to be taking out a lot of plastic. Some wire snips. You may need some wire strippers. You'll definitely need flux. I'm using paste flux. For this I'm using 6040 leaded solder. I recommend 26 gauge for the ground and power wires, for anything over an amp. Data plus and minus can be smaller. These are 30. Some fine tip tweezers, and a razor blade. A fine tipped soldering iron set to 400 centigrade. A moist sponge. A brass sponge. The idea is you keep your tip clean by soldering, wiping on the brass, and then cleaning corrosion using the sponge. You need a multimeter or something to check continuity. Need a USB-C breakout board with 5.1K resistors attached to CC1 and CC2 to ground. This allows all chargers. Electric tape. For testing while soldering, we need a USB to micro USB cord and also a USB bay with the pins exposed. You can just hook it up and have access to the pins. A Phillips 00 screwdriver. First we have to tear it down. There are 7 black screws keeping us from getting inside, 4 on the back, 2 on the bottom, and 1 under the game bay flap on the top. The 2 on the bottom here. With all 7 removed, check for memory card in game. Tap the power button to make sure it's off. And you are good to open. I like to use my nail to pull behind the left trigger to pop and then the right trigger to pop. After that, open slowly like a clamshell. There is a belt at the bottom. Lift up on the gray tab opposite of the belt side, and then it can pull free. Alright, so I've actually only eyeballed this, will it fit or not. I set this in the spot here, making sure that it won't overlap on the power cable from the battery, making sure it'll fit in the case here underneath the other port, kind of marking where I'm going to have to cut things out, but this is just going to be grinding away, trying to make it fit. I marked where I saw that it would fit, and now I'm just cutting out the plastic to get that out of the way before I could really see how deep it had to go into the case. I just take this very slow, marking and cutting, getting a little deeper, seeing a little more can it fit before I actually destroy any of the outer case. Measure and get visuals, and then cut some away, and bit by bit, mark, cut, visualize, mark, cut, visualize. It takes forever. Well, the first time, now I know to go pretty deep, how big to make the hole, etc. The first thing I'm trying to measure in here is the USB-C bay needs to fit in with the micro USB. On the other hand, I'm also trying to fit the whole board on the inside of the case. I'm putting all of the time lapse in here so you can see it. Holding the board up to a light, you can definitely see the light through it a lot better the more you grind it down. Kind of use that to be careful not to grind too thin. But this makes it get very thin. I knew that one part of it was going to be removing part of the breakout board itself off of the adapter here. You just got to be careful not to remove any of the traces, and actually you can get rid of a lot behind those first legs on the USB adapter. I come back to it a few times before I get it small enough, but I take a lot off of it. More time lapse of a lot more plastic to remove. I make room on the adapter for the microphone hole here. I do end up getting rid of the other side as well, but right now I'm considering the microphone. And it looks like it pretty much fits. I need to get the micro USB in there to see if it actually fits. So I brace my thumb on the board to pull the battery plug out. The Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna has 2 screws, and then it lifts out. Shoulder buttons will basically fall off. 2 screws holding the plastic cage on. This is basically where I see all potential for future mods, is taking advantage of this space. The left board grounding plate needs to come off. It has a screw. Game bay door pops off. I lift up at the power button to pull the top bracket off. And then all 3 belts have a clamp on the opposite side of the belt. Pull that upward and the belt will come in and out. The belts have tabs on the sides of them to help pull free using screwdriver. The motherboard can now flip towards the R board. Careful, there is a tall pin, and then again a clip opposite of the belt. This belt is for the camera. The motherboard is free. Okay, now we can use the motherboard to see if the USB-C breakout board and the micro USB with the motherboard attached all fit in the case at the same time. And surprise, we need to remove more plastic. And I end up removing all possible extra from the breakout board. Look at the traces and remove all besides the traces. Then with the motherboard in the case, try to fit the USB-C from the outside. That'll show you what it's missing, or rather where to remove more plastic. Slow going, really don't want to remove too much. So now with the USB-C under it, I can plug the micro USB into the motherboard. It's still quite snug, so I'm going to have to remove more. Well, now it comfortably fits. Still more plastic to remove that allows the wires to go from the adapter to the spot on the board. So yeah, the whole plastic piece comes off from above the micro USB. I take it slow here, seeing if I can fit it in, but the whole thing comes off. By removing just enough, the rest can kind of brace it. And this whole edge has to go. You cannot remove the resistor or it won't work, and luckily this does not. They should sell them this smaller size. With the motherboard and plastic cage on, I mark where the wires need to go. I have to make a tunnel around the motherboard for the wires to follow. I'm really sorry about the off camera, but you will be able to see it, and also follow the wires later when we assemble it. So there's one hole on the black, there need to be two, and then this hole on the screen side plastic. These holes end up right on top of each other. I mark on the motherboard where the wires come through. Okay, there also needs to be a hole between the first hole and where the micro USB spot is. Wire needs to go through there as well. With all of the plastic altered, it's important to put the whole thing together. Make sure everything fits where we need to. If anything needs to be ground away, you can do that. But now what's left is wiring and then reassembly. So here's the motherboard and here's the micro USB port. First we have to make sure the cable works for our tests. So insert the micro USB cable. Set the multimeter to the continuity symbol. And make sure the pins on the USB bay beep in continuity when you touch those pins on the board. And they do not beep when they touch each other. It's best to check that periodically because it will need to pass that test in the end as well. Grabbing some length of the data lines first. I use the yellow wire for white because I don't have any white wires. Strip the tips and tin them. I keep these pretty short. These are going to attach right to the pins. Come in loaded with plenty of flux. The first one's a pain in the butt for me. I take a long time wrestling trying to get it in place because it needs to stay on there for a long time, so you got to get in a comfortable position that you can hold it on. Once I did, I still didn't even hold it on there long enough to get it hot enough. Our goal here is to connect the white wire to the second pin and the green wire to the third pin. These are data minus and data plus. It's much better to come in ahead of the wire, heat up the pin, and then add a very fluxed wire, tinned wire, to the pin, and then heat up that wire on top of the pin until the solder melts to the pin. After successfully attaching it, make sure to tug on the wire, not too tough, you don't want to damage the pin, just make sure it's on there real good. Same deal with data green, come in tinned and with a lot of flux, heat up the pin ahead of time, and then add the wire to the pretty hot pad already, and keep it on there for a while until it too gets hot enough. And it also can pass the tug test. Keep your board clean, time to come in and with some rubbing alcohol and Q-tips, clean the area around the port. This also checks to make sure you have a really good connection. Careful when lifting like you see me do here. Don't lift the pins off the board, try to bend the wire. And then continuity test, none of the pins should touch each other. The green and white wires should be connected to the center two pins on the USB. And of course not to each other. Alright, same deal with the red wire, come in tinned and covered in flux. Heat up the pad on the board on the connector side of the fuse and set the wire in and heat up the wire. Once everything is hot enough, pull the iron away. Tug test and cleanup, but this one's pretty easy. With the black wire, I'm going to add it right to the port, so I got to get it hot and add tin to it. Then come in with the tinned and fluxed black wire, heat up the port again, and heat up the wire while touching the port, and it fuses real easy. Unfortunately for me, too much solder. It's going to mess with the case. To remove excess solder, just come in with a fluxed frayed wire and heat it up, and keep coming in with a new fluxed frayed wire and soak it up with a lot of heat, and then clean it all up with rubbing alcohol. I just tape it down so that the wires don't move for the rest of the mod. All 4 wires need to pass that continuity test, and then this test. So set to ohm, and with the red probe on the black wire, ground, you should be able to read about 1.2 mega ohms between ground and data plus, and also ground and data minus. If you don't have these readings, those wires need to be redone, or the USB won't work. Alright, still some plastic underneath here needs to be removed to make room for those wires underneath the board, just there. You can remove it all. I basically do. There's a teeny little flap left. Once you're sure it fits, time to reattach the camera. If this is too hard, you can always just remove that right controller board and reassemble it and then put it back together. If that latch opposite is open, it should slide in, and then you should be able to close the door. Convenient aiding tabs. Just be very careful putting it back together that you don't force anything. If things don't fit into those places, you may need to remove some more plastic, or maybe something's in the way. Just as long as you don't force anything, you can always try to fix it. Doors opposite need to be wide open to fit the belt in. This belt is huge, go slow with it. I think it has those holes on the side just so you can use a screwdriver to slowly go back and forth. Clamps like the other 3 though. L board and power button, same. Door wide open, slips right in. Tabs for assist, door closed. Alright, time to weave these wires behind this bracket. Once they're in that position, we're going to need the grounding plate going from the motherboard to the left board, and then back in there to get the screw in. Now secured, it's going nowhere. Second screw. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth has 2 screws, but you can wait on this. I have to take it off in a little bit anyway. Or you can just put the game door behind it, like I should have. That screw on the L board for the ground plate. With the USB-C in place, we need to measure the wires, how long they need to be, and snip them. So I try flipping over the USB-C here and soldering the breakout board in, but they're a little too short to do that. So I end up having to take the plastic bracket off anyway, just to solder those wires on. I put this little piece of cardboard so that my solder doesn't get on the motherboard. Make sure you do something similar. Don't solder right on the motherboard. Black wire goes into ground or GND. Red wire goes into VCC or 5 volts. Green wire goes into data plus or D plus. White wire goes into data minus or D minus. I'm using a yellow wire instead of a white wire. For 5 volts, this adapter says V-bus, I think, instead of VCC. Alright, with the adapter soldered, You can get the plastic brace back in and screwed down. On that top bar, I like to push the volume side in first. They do click in when you push them in, the little tabs. And now I see that my game door won't go back on, so I gotta take off the Wi-Fi and 3G antennas again, just to put the game door back in, and then replace the antennas again. The L and R buttons just drop right on. The battery coupler just goes right on top of the battery connector and pushes down, and then it fits right into its area again. That's under the USB-C. I add a little piece of electric tape just to make sure those solder points can't touch anything. And then I measure a little piece of popsicle stick to fit behind the USB-C breakout. I'm going to tape it to the breakout board also. This is just so pushing on the USB-C pushes on the black brace. Now the hole I made for the port kind of exposes quite a bit of the breakout board and the motherboard, so I just wrap it with tape so you can't see in. Gives the ports a neat looking black background instead of being able to see their boards. I just weave it around the ports and stick it in behind the motherboard. This is purely cosmetic though. All Vitas are pretty water sensitive. Cutting away the excess tape for the microphone hole. Finally reattaching the rear touch panel. It has a latch on the opposite side of where the belt goes. And then it's easiest to overlap the two cases so that the belt comes way over like this. Close the latch. The case hooks on the headphone jack and the USB ports, and then again closes like a clam. Don't force anything, just took it completely apart. Check that everything is seated correctly. My battery was up a little bit. Hooking on the headphone and USB ports again. And then press all around. You do kind of need to press firmly near the port. The electrical tape in there is getting smashed. I really like this look. It looks so odd. Two ports right on top of each other. But I really like to keep the original port. Okay, those 7 black screws, 2 on the bottom, 4 on the back, 1 on the top under the game port door. I do recommend putting a screen protector on your back and front to make sure that they don't get scratched while you're modding. Well, besides giving it a good clean, this is done. Thanks for checking out this mod.